Okay, now that you have seen the Fiddler video, go ahead and take a chance to now jot down the things that you have learned from this particular clip from Fiddler on the Roof. Anything that you learned about anti-Semitic movements, Jewish history or culture, or just the definition of pogroms, that would be great. Go ahead and take a pause right now. One of the segments in chapter 10 was talking about the United States Civil War. So the first thing I want to do is make sure that you understand what a civil war is. A civil war is when one or more, or excuse me, two or more parts of the American, or excuse me, gosh, I am just all tripping up today. It's two or more parts of a certain country that are fighting for political control. So it doesn't really count if they're just looking for social change. It only counts when two or more parties are looking for control over the government. So in some sense, you can say that the French Revolution was a civil war. It was a revolution in that they were trying to change, like, really dramatically how the government is run, because as you may remember, the French Revolution started with a monarchy and they wanted to change it to a democracy, and that didn't exactly work out, but that's a whole nother story for another day. In the American Civil War, that was not the case. We're not trying to change the format of the actual government, because they still wanted democracy. It's just that the southern states wanted to secede. Secede meaning to leave or to break apart from the whole. And so we're in some ways very lucky to have only one when you really think about it. My father, when I was growing up as a little girl, always told me when I was growing up here in the United States that, you know, you guys are so lucky that you only have to study about one civil war in United States history, because in Chinese history, there's like hundreds. I mean, that's not even an exaggeration. So what I would like for you to do is now take a pause on this particular video and jot down what it is that you already know about the Civil War, any sort of names of battles or dates, or any sort of like big names that you remember from the Civil War, any generals or anything like that, and also to write down the causes for the Civil War. And yes, slavery is a common answer. I would like for you to come up with something else besides slavery. Go ahead and pause this video now, and then we'll continue. There are lots and lots of movies about the Civil War because, well, as a nation, we're slightly obsessed with it. So there's tons out there, but there's one in particular that I really liked, and that is Gone with the Wind, which was a great book to begin with. It was an extremely popular book at the time in America, which got turned into a movie, I believe, in somewhere in the late 1930s. So what I really like about this is because it really showed you not necessarily the political side, I believe, of the Civil War, which lots of movies like to show you, but the actual social change, the change in the social landscape of America. And the Civil War did just that. It really, I don't know if it changed it for the better, but it definitely changed what America looked like and felt like and worked and so on and so forth. So now we're going to go ahead and begin the movie, and I would like to set it up for you. What you're going to see is a scene in the I mean, literally, this is the first thing that you're going to see in the movie besides the introduction video, the introduction music stuff. And then, because that's what all movies used to do, they have these big instrumental pieces in the beginning. And then you're going to see like some narration that was done almost like PowerPoint style. There's like letters that goes across the screen rather than anybody actually narrating. And this is the first spoken part. So in other words, this is the first like acting scene that you will see. It is completely romanticized. I don't know if it's really true that they all walked around dressed like this back then on plantation life. But to a certain extent, this was, I guess, the romanticism of the Southern lifestyle, and that was what was interrupted and changed forever. And as you can see on my notes, not always for the better. It is very romantic, and I would love to think that that's how it really was, but I know as a historian it probably wasn't. But what I really liked about this clip was it showed the two different attitudes of three different teenagers about the Civil War, right, like literally days before it actually began. So I would like for you to watch the clip now, and I really hope you enjoy it.
we care if we were expelled from college, Scarlett? The war's gonna start any day now, so we'd have left college anyhow.
War? Isn't it exciting, Scarlett? You know those fool Yankees actually want a war?
We'll show 'em.
Fiddle-dee-dee. War, war, war. This war talk spoiling all the fun at every party this spring. I get so bored I could scream. Besides, there isn't going to be any war.
Not gonna be any war.
Why, honey, of course there's going to be a war.
If either of you boys says war, just once again, I'll go in the house and slam the door.
But Scarlett,
Don't
honey.
you want us to have a war?
Wait a minute, Scarlett, honey, please.
Sorry that was such a short clip. I couldn't find anything longer with that particular scene in it on YouTube. And for whatever reason, it won't let me record if I had my own video, which I do. I own that movie both on DVD and Blu-ray. And so I'm really sorry. But I hope that kind of hooks you in. And showing the arrogance of those young boys about the start of the war. They were very, very for the war. They think they're going to win it. They think they're going to lick those Yankees. And then there's Scarlett, who's just nonchalant and says, you know what? This is totally interfering with my social life. I hate it. You know, parties are so boring now because this is all they talk about, blah, blah, blah. So it's really interesting to see the different dynamic and attitudes about the war from these two particular teenagers. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to the Irish Potato Famine and the Westward Movement, which actually combined in your textbook into one particular segment because it does, one kind of begets the other in some sort of way. And so what I want you to do now is go ahead and pause the video and talk about what is it you know about the Irish Potato Famine and the Westward Movement in the United States. What caused the potato famine? Where do people go? After the potato famine happened, where did the potato famine happen? I really hope the title kind of gives it away. And think to yourself, like, what if you were Irish and the potato famine was happening? What are some of your options? What are some possible solutions that you could have? So, so go ahead and pause the video right now and jot all of that down. Okay, so what I did was I was able to find a pretty good YouTube video. I'm trying a new video this year. Last year there was one with kind of like river dance music to it in the background. It's really cute, but I don't know if it did a really good job explaining to you exactly what happened with the potato famine, and I was able to find this other video that I think will be much more helpful, so I hope I'm right about that. Okay, so here we go.
Beginning in 1845 and lasting for 6 years, the potato famine killed over 1 million men, women, and children in Ireland and caused another million to flee the country. Ireland in the mid-1800s was an agricultural nation populated by 8 million persons who were among the poorest people in the Western world. A British survey in 1835 found half of the royal families in Ireland living in single-room, windowless mud cabins that didn't have chimneys. Up to a dozen persons lived inside a cabin, sleeping in straw on the bare ground, sharing the place with the family's pig and chickens. The average tenant farmer lived at a subsistence level on less than 10 acres. By law, any improvements they made, such as building a stone house, became the property of the landlord. Thus there was never any incentive to upgrade their living conditions. Landless laborers often rented small fertilized potato plots from farmers, with a portion of their potato harvest given up as payment of rent. Farmers and laborers alike lived in a state of permanent insecurity, with the possibility always looming that they might be thrown off their plot of land. Both groups were dependent on the potato for their existence. About 1590, potatoes were introduced to Ireland. Farmers quickly discovered they thrived in the country's cool, moist soil with very little labor. And by 1800, the potato had become the staple crop in the poorest regions, with more than 3 million Irish peasants subsisting solely on the vegetable. The famine began quite mysteriously in September 1845. Leaves on potato plants suddenly turned black and curled and then rotted, seemingly the result of a fog that had wafted across the fields of Ireland. The cause was actually an airborne fungus, originally transported in the holds of ships traveling from North America to England. The blight spread through the fields as fungal spores settled on the leaves of healthy potato plants, multiplied, and were carried in the millions by cool breezes surrounding the plants. The attacked plants fermented while providing the nourishment the fungus needed to live. emitting a nauseous stench as they blackened and withered in front of the disbelieving eyes of the Irish peasants. There had been crop failures in the past due to weather and other diseases, but the strange new failure was unlike anything ever seen. The Irish in the countryside began to live off wild blackberries, ate nettles, turnips, old cabbage leaves, edible seaweed, shellfish, roots, even green grass. They sold their livestock, pawned everything they owned, including their clothing, to pay the rent to avoid certain eviction, and then bought what little food they could with any leftover money. Making matters worse, the winter of 1846 and 1847 were the worst in living memory, as one blizzard after another buried homes in the snow up to their roots. Many people died not from hunger, but from associated diseases, like typhus, dysentery, fever, and dropsy, in an era when doctors were unable to provide any cure. Many penniless tenants were thrown into jail. Others were sent overseas to British North America. Landlords would make phony promises of money, food, and clothing, then pack half-naked people in overcrowded British sailing ships, poorly built and often unseaworthy, that became known as coffin ships. And so the Great Famine was a period of starvation, disease, and mass immigration between 1845 and 1852, during which the population of Ireland was reduced by 20 to 25%. Approximately 1 million of the population died and 1 million more emigrated from Ireland's shores. The impact on Irish culture is still felt today.
Okay, so that video would have been way more fun, I think, if it had like kind of jivey little jigs in the back, but it was extremely informative, so I really hope you got a lot out of that. So how does that necessarily affect us as Americans? Well, close to 1/2 to about 2/3 of the Irish population actually immigrated here to United States. And this is a great time for us to talk about push and pull factors. I'm pretty sure previously to this class, either Mrs. Groover, Mrs. Voskular, or Mr. Cowan, whoever you had for US history, world history, whatnot, was able to talk to you about push and pull factors. So I'm just checking to see how much you guys actually remember. So go ahead and take a pause and figure out what push and pull factors are, like what definitions and examples can you think of, and try not to look on the slide. Okay, so I really hope you didn't cheat. And so push factors and pull factors. I think it's easier for us to talk about examples and then maybe definitions or vice versa. I don't know exactly how that works, but here we go. So push factors are reasons why people would actually leave a particular location. So in the case of the Irish potato famine, it was because the crops were failing and they really didn't have any substantial way to feed themselves. Or even meager, I shouldn't even say substantial, but so they didn't have any way to feed themselves, so if they could leave, they did. And that was usually done through some sort of servitude or some sort of contract. So people would say, oh, I need the money, and people would loan them the money, either in Ireland or in America, and they would basically sell themselves out to servitude. So in other words, they would become servants of some sort and pay it off, very much like the English indentured servants that came to United States colonies, the British colony here in the United States when our country was just building. So some of those push factors, other than like the potato famine, like we talked about, is any sort of like natural disaster. If there's like a hurricane or an earthquake that really just destroy the economic premise of that particular country, any sort of political instability, a lot of your family members can probably tell you about that. For example, you guys are probably a little too young to have this happen in your family, but it used to be a lot of my Vietnamese American students would tell me how their parents, or even my own classmates in high school, their parents came during the 1970s to escape the Vietnam War. And so that was extremely popular for that to happen.